The day I surprised my parents with a beach house. The biggest gift I had ever given anyone. I walked in expecting tears, maybe even a long family hug. I imagined my mom covering her mouth in shock, and my dad pretending not to cry, while pretending the ocean breeze was just strong today. After years of working nonstop and building my own stability from scratch, giving them something this beautiful felt like a full circle moment. It felt like healing. But that moment never came. When I unlocked the door, the house wasn't empty, and it definitely wasn't waiting quietly for the surprise I had planned. Instead, my sister, Rylan Keats, was standing in the middle of the living room, barefoot, unpacking her suitcase like she had already signed a lease. Clothes were tossed over the back of the couch, her makeup bag was open on the kitchen counter, and she had even brought groceries, like she was settling in for a long stay. She didn't jump in shock when I walked in. She didn't even look embarrassed. She just smirked and said, "Oh, you're early." I stood there frozen, the key still in my hand. "What are you doing here, Rylan?" She kept unpacking, tossing her shoes into a corner. "Mom and Dad said I could use the place indefinitely. They thought I needed a break." She said it so casually, like this house was hers by default, like my money, my effort, my gift didn't matter at all. The sting hit immediately, a sharp, sinking feeling I'd felt too many times growing up. I had worked for years, saving every spare dollar while they praised Rylan for simply existing. She had always been the one who needed help, the one they defended, the one they excused. And even now, at 29, after building a life completely on my own, I realized nothing had changed. Not for them. Not for her. I looked around the house I had carefully chosen. I picked this place because my parents always dreamed of waking up near the ocean. I pictured them sipping morning coffee on the porch, listening to the waves. I wanted to give them peace, comfort, a little joy after all the years they struggled. But seeing Rylan standing there, claiming it like a prize she was entitled to, cracked something in me. "This is for Mom and Dad," I said quietly. "Not for you to move into." She shrugged with that same smug confidence she had since childhood. "Well, they told me I could. And you know how they are. They said you wouldn't mind. They said you'd understand." Understand? I had barely even processed what I was seeing. In that moment, I realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the first stab of betrayal. The gift I had saved for, sacrificed for, dreamed about, it had already been taken over before my parents even saw it. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. When I called my parents, Elias and Nora, I honestly believed they would clear everything up. I expected them to tell Rylan to step aside, to at least acknowledge that the house was something I paid for with my own hard work. Instead, the moment I explained what I walked into, the tone of the conversation shifted in a way I knew too well. My mom sighed and said, "Marin, don't make a big deal out of this. Your sister deserves a break. She's been stressed." My dad chimed in, agreeing like it was the most obvious thing in the world. They spoke as if Rylan moving into a house I bought was normal, even reasonable. I stood there holding the phone, feeling that old familiar ache in my chest. It was the same feeling I used to get when we were kids and Rylan ruined something of mine, only for my parents to tell me not to overreact. Back then, she was the fragile one, the one who needed protecting. And I was the one who had to understand, adjust, and take responsibility. Hearing them brush me off now made it clear nothing had changed. I tried again, calmly explaining that the house was a gift for them, not a place for Rylan to move into without asking me. But they kept repeating the same things. She needed space, she needed time, she needed comfort. It didn't matter that I was the one who paid for everything. It didn't matter that I had worked for years to be able to afford something this meaningful. What mattered to them was Rylan's feelings. I realized they weren't even listening to me. To them, the house wasn't my gift. It was a family freebie, something everyone could use however they wanted. My role was the same as always: provide, give, stay quiet, and don't complain. As I stood in the kitchen of that beach house, my own gift, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I wanted this to be a moment of gratitude and closeness. Instead, it turned into another reminder of where I stood in the family. I was the dependable one, the strong one, the one they believed would get over it. But this time, something inside me shifted. I wasn't a child anymore. I wasn't going to let them use me or my hard work like they always had. And as much as it hurt to admit, I understood that my parents didn't see the house as mine at all. They saw it as something they could hand over to Rylan without even thinking. That was the moment I knew I had to stop pretending things would ever be different unless I made them different myself. When I went back to the beach house a few days later, hoping maybe things had calmed down, I realized the situation had only gotten worse. Rylan wasn't just staying there. She was acting like the place belonged to her. The moment I walked in, I could see the changes everywhere. She had moved the furniture around, switched out decorations I bought, and even added her own things to make the house match her style. It no longer felt like the peaceful home I had chosen for my parents. It felt like Rylan's personal playground. In the hallway, I noticed she had put little labels on the doors, calling one room her office and another her guest suite. It made my stomach twist. I had only owned the house for a short time, and already she was claiming spaces as if I didn't exist. I stood there, staring at the labels, wondering how she had the courage to do something like this without even talking to me. Later, I ran into a neighbor who lived next door. He smiled politely and said, "You must be Rylan's sister. She told us she's the owner now. Beautiful place she's got." Hearing that made my chest tighten. The house was in my name, my money, my effort, and she was walking around the neighborhood acting like she paid for all of it. She didn't just cross a line. She stepped over it with confidence, like she had every right. When I confronted my parents again, hoping they would finally understand how serious this was, they gave me the same tired answers. "Maren, you're making this bigger than it is," my dad said. "She's just settling in," my mom added. They acted like I was being dramatic for not wanting my sister to take over something I bought. Every time I tried to explain how uncomfortable I felt, they brushed it off. They kept saying Rylan wasn't hurting anyone, that she needed the space, that she was finally finding stability. It didn't matter that she didn't ask. It didn't matter that she was telling strangers she owned property that wasn't hers. It didn't matter that I was the one who paid for everything. To them, Rylan always had a reason, always had an excuse. Standing in that house, seeing how she had changed everything without asking, hearing my parents defend her again, I felt something inside me shift. I started to see the truth I had ignored for years. This wasn't new behavior. Rylan had always acted entitled, and everyone around her made it easy for her. I had spent my whole life giving her the benefit of the doubt, telling myself she would grow out of it, convincing myself things would get better someday. But now it was right in front of me, impossible to ignore. She didn't respect my work, my effort, or my boundaries. And my parents didn't want to see anything wrong with her actions. For the first time, I allowed myself to admit it. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. It was a pattern, one that had been building for years. When I went back to the beach house again, hoping things hadn't gotten any worse, I noticed a strange number of shoes by the door. Shoes that didn't belong to me or Rylan. At first, I thought maybe she had friends visiting, but something about it felt off. When I walked inside, I saw fresh towels folded on the table, small welcome baskets, and printed sheets with house rules. My heart dropped. None of this was mine. Later that evening, while I was sitting on the couch trying to make sense of everything, a notification popped up on my phone. It was from a rental app one had used once for traveling. Out of curiosity, I opened it. When I typed in the area of the beach house, I almost stopped breathing. There it was, a listing with pictures of my house, taken without my permission. It advertised cozy rooms by the ocean, with weekly and monthly rates. The host name said, Rylan K. I clicked through the photos. It felt like someone had taken my private space and put it out for strangers to judge and book. The description said things like my beach property, and guests will love the peaceful atmosphere. She had already listed it, already taken inquiries, and even had a few reviews from people who had stayed there in the last week. She wasn't just staying in the house, she was making money off it. When I confronted her, she didn't even look guilty. She shrugged and said, "I thought it would help me get back on my feet. It's not a big deal." To her, it was easy money. To me, it was a deep cut. I had worked for years to afford this place. I bought it as a gift for our parents, not a business for her. I felt my hands shaking as I called my mom and dad. I explained everything, the listing, the guests, the money, the way Rylan had turned my gift into her own little rental business. I expected them to be shocked, maybe even angry. But instead, I heard another sigh from my mom. "Maren, you make plenty of money. Why are you being selfish?" she said. My dad added, "She needs a way to earn. You should be happy she's trying." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They weren't upset with her for using my house. They were upset with me for questioning it. They made it sound like I was the problem, like I was blocking some harmless opportunity. But the truth was clear. They didn't care that it was my property. They didn't care that I never agreed to any of this. They saw the beach house as something Rylan could use however she wanted. As long as she was comfortable, my feelings didn't matter. Sitting there, listening to them defend her again, something inside me hardened. They weren't just ignoring my boundaries. They were trying to turn the house I bought with love into Rylan's personal income source. And that betrayal hit deeper than anything before. When I went to the house again to talk to Rylan face to face, I told myself to stay calm. I thought maybe, if we just spoke honestly, things could still be fixed. But the moment I brought up the rental situation, everything went wrong fast. Rylan crossed her arms and rolled her eyes like I was bothering her. "You didn't buy this house for Mom and Dad," she said sharply. "You bought it to show off. You wanted everyone to see how successful you are." Her words hit me like a slap. I had spent years saving for this place. I wanted to give our parents something beautiful, something they never had. Showing off was the last thing on my mind. But she said it with so much confidence that, for a moment, I felt myself doubting everything. When I walked out to the porch, trying to breathe, my parents arrived. I hoped they came to finally help settle the situation. But instead, they walked straight to her side. My mom gave me a tired look. "Maren, why do you always make things difficult?" she said. "Your sister is trying her best." My dad shook his head in disappointment. "We raised you better than this. You have everything you need. Why can't you be supportive?" I felt something in my chest tighten. They weren't listening. They weren't even trying to see my side. They stood there acting like I was the problem, like I was ruining some peaceful moment instead of reacting to a huge betrayal. Rylan stepped closer and said, "You owe us, Maren. You owe this family everything you have. You wouldn't be where you are without us." Those words cut deeper than anything else. "You owe us." It wasn't the first time she had said something like that, but hearing it now, with my parents silently agreeing, made something inside me snap. For years, I had been the responsible one. I worked long hours, paid my own bills, supported myself, and never asked them for anything. I had done everything on my own. Yet somehow, they still believed I was in debt to them, while Rylan, who had taken more help than anyone, was treated like she deserved everything. All the small moments from our childhood, the excuses, the favoritism, the double standards came rushing back. I remembered every time they made me give up something for her, every time they dismissed my feelings, every time they said I was strong enough to handle being treated unfairly. Standing there, hearing them defend her again, I finally saw the truth without trying to soften it. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't about a house. This was a pattern that had followed me my whole life. And I had allowed it because I kept hoping things would change. But now, in this moment, with all of them turned against me, I finally understood the full extent of their manipulation. They didn't want fairness. They wanted control. And I knew something had to change, this time for real. After the last argument, I knew I needed to take a step back and think carefully. Emotions were high, and I couldn't let anger make me lose control. I went home and pulled out all the papers I had from buying the beach house. I went through the purchase documents slowly, line by line, making sure I understood every detail. I wanted to be certain I really owned the house. When I finished, I felt a small sense of relief. Everything was in my name. I legally owned 100% of the property. No one else had a right to it. Even though that was comforting, I still couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was happening. I started looking through messages on my phone and computer, checking for anything unusual. At first, it felt like just regular conversations, but then I noticed messages between Rylan and my parents. I couldn't believe what I was reading. They were talking about me behind my back, making plans for the house, and trying to find ways to pressure me into giving ownership to Rylan eventually. Every word I read felt like a punch. They were planning this betrayal together, quietly and strategically, thinking I wouldn't notice. My hands shook as I read more messages. They talked about convincing me that I didn't need the house, that it would be easier if I let Rylan take care of it. My parents kept calling me selfish in the messages, while Rylan promised to handle things nicely. I realized they weren't just ignoring me or siding with her. They were actively working to take what I had earned and given as a gift. The betrayal was undeniable. I had always trusted my parents to respect me, to see the truth, and now I saw clearly how wrong I had been. I took a deep breath and tried to calm myself. I could feel my anger building, but I knew acting without a plan would only give them an advantage. This had to be done carefully. I couldn't let them manipulate me again. I started thinking about my next steps, about how I could respond in a way that would protect what was mine. I needed strategy, not rage. I needed facts, not emotions. I needed to make sure no one could take the house or my effort away from me. I made a decision. I wouldn't rush into anything. I wouldn't yell or threaten. Instead, I would gather all the proof, understand the situation fully, and act in a way that left them no choice but to respect my ownership. I felt a strange calm wash over me, a quiet confidence I hadn't felt before. For the first time since all this started, I felt in control. The house was mine. The truth was in my hands. And I was ready to respond, but this time I would do it carefully, smartly, and with full authority. They wouldn't see it coming, and they wouldn't have any way to stop me. After I finished gathering all the evidence and understanding what had been going on, I knew it was time to take action. I had spent years building my life, working hard for everything I had, and I wasn't going to let Rylan or my parents take that away from me. I decided to start the eviction process. I wanted everything to be done properly, legally, and clearly, so there would be no way for them to argue later. The first thing I did was change the locks and reset the security system. I made sure Rylan couldn't get in, and that all access codes she had were deactivated. I felt a strange mix of relief and determination as I did it. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was taking control. I knew it might cause a scene, but I also knew it was necessary. The next day, I got calls from Rylan and my parents. Rylan was panicking, asking why she couldn't enter the house. My parents were shouting on the phone, telling me I was being cruel and heartless. I stayed calm. I didn't argue, I didn't explain. I simply let them panic for a moment, knowing that all of this was long overdue. After that, I sent a formal notice to Rylan and my parents. It clearly stated that they were not allowed on the property without my permission, and that any attempt to enter would be considered trespassing. I made sure the notice was official, legal, and undeniable. I wanted to be firm, leaving no room for excuses or confusion. As I sent the notice, I felt the weight of everything I had endured over the years start to lift. For too long, I had been pushed aside, dismissed, and treated like I didn't matter. Now, I was standing up for myself, setting boundaries that couldn't be ignored. My parents kept calling, leaving messages, begging me to forgive and let it go. They accused me of being heartless, of overreacting, of hurting the family. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Their words couldn't change the truth. They had treated me unfairly for years, and now it was finally my turn to protect myself. Rylan tried to contact neighbors, hoping someone would let her in, but everyone followed the rules. She realized quickly that she no longer had control over the situation. For the first time, she was powerless in a place she had treated as her own. Watching all of this unfold quietly from my side, I felt a sense of justice. Not the kind that comes from revenge or anger, but the kind that comes from taking back what is yours and finally drawing a clear line. I wasn't doing this to punish anyone. I was doing it to reclaim my life, my gift, and my hard work. For the first time in a long time, I felt in control. The house was mine, and anyone who tried to take it without permission would face the consequences. I had acted, and I had done it right. No more arguing, no more excuses, just clear boundaries and protection of what I earned. When my parents and Rylan demanded a meeting, I agreed to go, but I knew I had to be prepared. I printed out every single message I had found between Rylan and my parents. Every plan, every comment about pressuring me to give the house to her, every attempt to manipulate me. I organized them carefully, so there could be no confusion about what had been said. As I walked into the room, Rylan tried to act casual, even smiling like nothing had happened. But the moment I laid the messages on the table, her expression changed. She tried to cover, saying some of the messages were taken out of context or misunderstood. My parents immediately jumped in, nodding and claiming it was all miscommunication, as if I was overreacting. I stayed calm and didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I let the printed messages speak for themselves. I watched their faces as they read each line. I made sure they understood that these were not my interpretations or exaggerations. These were their own words. Once I had gone through the messages, I spoke clearly. This is my house. I bought it with my own money. I gave it to Mom and Dad as a gift, and it is not Rylan's to take, rent out, or claim in any way. I made sure to keep my tone steady, without anger, without pleading. I drew a line in the sand. From this moment on, I am giving you one choice. Respect my property and my boundaries, or you will lose access entirely. There will be no exceptions, no discussions, no manipulations. I have proof of everything, and I am prepared to act if these boundaries are ignored. The room fell silent. I could see Rylan fidgeting, trying to think of a way to talk her way out. My parents looked uncomfortable, their usual confidence shaken. For once, they had no words that could dismiss what was in front of them. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I simply stated the truth and made it clear that I was in control. This wasn't about revenge or punishment. This was about respect and fairness. I wasn't asking them to like it or agree with it. I was telling them that my property, my effort, and my choices had to be honored. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of power and clarity. I wasn't the girl who had always given in, who had always tried to keep peace at her own expense. I was standing firm, calmly and confidently, and I knew they had no choice but to listen. By the end of the meeting, it was clear they understood my position. I had drawn my boundary, and I wasn't backing down. From now on, anyone who wanted to enter that house would need my permission. The control was mine, and finally they had to respect it. A few days after the confrontation, I thought the situation was finally under control. I had made my boundaries clear, and Rylan had seemed to back off. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. One evening, I got a call from a neighbor saying something strange was happening at the house. Rylan had shown up with a spare key, trying to get inside. I felt my stomach drop, but I stayed calm. I had already registered the property as restricted with the local authorities, so I knew this attempt would not succeed. I called the police immediately, explaining the situation. While I waited, I watched from my phone as the neighbor tried to keep Rylan from entering. When the police arrived, Rylan realized her plan had failed. She couldn't get in, and she couldn't argue that she had permission. The officers explained that trying to enter a property without consent, even with a spare key, counted as attempted unlawful entry. My heart was racing, but I felt a strange sense of relief. Finally, her disrespect for my boundaries had clear consequences. Later, my parents called me, sounding angry and worried. They told me to drop the charges, saying it was extreme and that family matters should be handled privately. I listened to them, but I didn't respond immediately. I thought about all the times they had dismissed me, excused Rylan, and made me feel guilty for standing up for myself. I realized I didn't have to follow their wishes this time. I decided to let the legal process move forward. Rylan faced charges for what she had done. It wasn't about punishment. It was about protecting what was mine and making sure my boundaries were respected. I felt a sense of strength I had never felt before. For the first time, I wasn't trying to please anyone or live up to anyone's expectations. I wasn't bending to Rylan's demands or my parents' pressure. I was acting for myself, and it felt empowering. The house, my gift, and my effort were finally protected. As I sat in the house that night, looking out at the ocean, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The betrayal, the manipulation, and the constant expectations from my family had finally been met with clear, firm action. I realized that this freedom didn't come from anyone forgiving me or approving of my choices. It came from standing up, setting boundaries, and refusing to let anyone take what was mine. For the first time, I felt genuinely free. Free from Rylan's entitlement, free from my parents' favoritism, and free to live my life on my own terms. After everything that happened, I finally felt like I could breathe. The beach house was completely mine now, and I decided to keep it that way. I didn't want to share it with anyone who had treated me unfairly or tried to take what I had worked so hard for. The house became my sanctuary, a place where I could think, rest, and just be myself without anyone interfering. I stopped trying to fix my relationship with my parents or Rylan. I didn't cut them off because I wanted revenge, but because I needed to protect myself. For years, I had bent over backward to meet their expectations, to be the perfect daughter or sister. I realized now that I didn't owe them my happiness or my peace. I started limiting contact, keeping conversations short and necessary, and avoiding situations that would drag me back into old patterns of stress and manipulation. At first, it felt strange to step back. I had always been the responsible one, the one expected to forgive, accommodate, and compromise. But as time passed, I began to enjoy the quiet, the freedom, and the control over my own life. I saw clearly how much I had been taken for granted, and I knew I didn't have to continue that cycle. I think my family slowly began to realize what they had lost. They had treated me like I would always be there, always forgiving, always giving, no matter how much they hurt me. By the time they understood, it was too late. I had drawn my line, and I wasn't crossing it. I wasn't going to let anyone take my hard work, my gift, or my peace ever again. I didn't feel the need to forgive them dramatically. and I didn't have any interest in making a big speech about how I had been wronged. I simply felt clarity. I had boundaries, I had independence, and I had the life I had worked for. Holding on to anger or hoping for recognition from them wouldn't change anything. What mattered was that I knew my worth and refused to let anyone undermine it. Sitting in the house, looking at the ocean, I felt a calm I had never known before. I wasn't running from my family. I was walking toward my own life. For the first time in a long time, I felt free, not because anyone approved, not because I needed validation, but because I had chosen myself. My gift, my effort, and my boundaries were respected, and that was enough. Life felt simple, steady, and mine. I was finally living for me.